So let's move on to Tottenham Hotspur with their new manager, Thomas Frank. But will they keep their captain, Heung-min Son? What's the latest on his future, Michael?
Well, Spurs return tomorrow for early testing, pre-season training, and the rest of the squad sort of will come back next week, sort of starting properly at the beginning of the week. And the Tottenham Hotspur club captain there, Son, Europa League winner, will return. Now, we've said over the last few weeks that this might be the summer where he looks for a new challenge. We also told you that Spurs will grant him a final decision if Spurs receive an acceptable offer. There's been interest over the past few years from Saudi Arabia. There's been interest from the MLS. I think Hugo Lloris might have had a word in his ear about living in Los Angeles. And there's also been reports this morning about he might want to stay now from South Korea. But what we do know is that they will speak. They will talk about potential final year. But what we do need to say is that Son is under contract at Tottenham and does have another year. Does he want that? Does he want that final year at Tottenham Hotspur? Does he want that final year under Thomas Frank? Or does Tottenham get a decent offer for him and he looks to pastures new? So everything is on the table at the moment. What I would say is we've got also talk of Christian Romero, that Atletico Madrid's interest won't go away. We know there was a sort of interest around 35 to 40 million a few weeks ago. I don't know what that was for, his left or his right arm, because you're not going to get Christian Romero for 35, 40 million, are you? So we'll wait and see on that one. But I don't think Thomas Frank will want to lose your captain and your vice-captain in his first start at the football club. OK, Michael, let's just break there, because Dharmesh has some breaking news for us.
Yeah, this is major breaking news. This is an original story from David Ornstein. We've just had it confirmed, and that is that Burnley have agreed a deal with Manchester City to sign their England international defender Kyle Walker. The deal could be worth £5 million. He's been having a medical today, has Kyle Walker, and all being well, a formal announcement is expected soon. The contract discussions for this deal are over a 2-year contract. Remember, Walker had entered the final year of his contract at Manchester City. He spent last season on loan with a Serie A club, AC Milan. Milan actually had an option to make that deal permanent, but they declined that option to make the deal permanent. Walker then came back to Manchester City, but we almost felt like his future at Manchester City was basically over because he'd been allowed to go to AC Milan in the first place. He didn't travel with Manchester City to the United States for the FIFA Club World Cup, obviously to allow him to try and get a deal sorted elsewhere. This one now looks really, really close. Burnley agreed a deal with Manchester City to sign defender Kyle Walker. This could be a sensational coup now for the newly promoted Burnley in the Premier League.
Thanks, Dharmesh. So Kyle Walker, former Tottenham player, on his way to Burnley. What sort of player does Thomas Frank need to bring in? What sort of profile is he looking for to bring into his Tottenham squad?
Well, they would like a pacey forward. There was interest in Brian Mbeumo. Anton Semenyo, there was interest from him from Bournemouth. We know they like Mohamed Kudus at West Ham United. Now, that's an interesting one because, you know, West Ham and Tottenham don't usually do business. I think the last transfer was Scott Parker, and that didn't really go down well in East London. I don't think Chelsea do business with Tottenham, do they, either? It's a sort of running trend with teams with Spurs, but because Arsenal and Chelsea don't seem to have that problem. But I think a pacey forward is what they'll look for. Look, there's talk about Kudus, what the value potentially would be on him. Release clause, I don't think Spurs would, or any clubs will look to his release clause, but then there's talk about West Ham maybe needing to sell Kudus for Graham Potter to bring people in. One source did tell me that is there a potential Tottenham tax because they don't really, in an ideal world, want to sell him to Spurs, maybe to another club. We'll have to wait and see on that one. I think Spurs might look for a new number 6 in that midfield and maybe some cover at fullback as well. So, look, I think it's going to ramp up at Spurs. I really do think so over the next few weeks. Can't forget that Matisse Tell has gone through on a permanent deal. Kota Takai, a Japanese defender, is going to arrive for around £5 million. Now, whether he goes straight into the first team, we'll wait and see. But it's one of those, Thomas Frank is going to see who comes in. Let's remember, a year ago, we were on this show and Brentford had agreed a fee with Leeds for Archie Gray. So I bet he can't wait to work with Archie Gray. He wanted to buy Brennan Johnson when he was at Brentford. So there's players there he's probably really looking forward to working with. But look, I'm not being funny. Spurs do need to bring a few in as well.
Well, let's hope he's looking forward to working with Daniel Levy, who keeps hijacking all his deals when he was at Brentford. There is Champions League football at Tottenham next season. They're going to need a better squad?
Honestly, I mean, good luck to Thomas. It's a really tough job. I mean, and I know he wants to challenge himself, and it's a great job for him. And you know, but he's arriving at a club who've won the Europa League, and I think most Tottenham supporters just love the fact that they'd won a trophy. But what comes with that beautiful Europa League trophy is Champions League football. Now, last season we saw Ange Postecoglou. He didn't really juggle in the end. He sort of put the Premier League to one side and went for the Europa League. And when the draw sort of opened up, you're not going to be able to do that next season. You're not going to be able to rest players for certain Europa League games. It's going to be a Tuesday, Wednesday Champions League, Saturday Premier League. It's going to be really, really tough. So I'm really intrigued to see how they cope. But it could be exciting because obviously he was so keen to join the club. So we'll wait and see.
And of course they have to deal with the different regulations for the players that they put in the different squads, which have different ramifications. It's the first time that Thomas Frank has been faced with that kind of problem.
Yeah, there's a real homegrown quota as well that Spurs have to adhere to. And another what interests me is that I've really enjoyed watching the videos of Thomas Frank mic'd up in training, listening to him in Monday Night Football, the importance of training. With all these games, you're not going to have much time to train, just going to pack your bags all the time. But look, I'm really...
Nobody takes as long as you.
No. But I mean, look, it's going to be an interesting pre-season as well. You know, they've got a couple of games in the UK. They've got Reading, then they've got Luton. Then they go to Hong Kong for a North London derby, as you do.
Yes.
And then you go, and then they've got, off the top of my head, they go to South Korea to play Newcastle. And then he could win a trophy, Claire. He could win a trophy. It's only PSG.
Injuries, the big problem under Ange Postecoglou. So what's going on the sports science front in the background? Well,
we know he's brought in some very, very highly regarded coaches, and I think that was one of the reasons why the deal was held up in terms of being announced, because you know, Justin Cochran, for example, so highly regarded at Brentford, England, but he was a Spurs under-16s coach. He's returned. He's brought a number of coaches with him. But what will be intriguing, you know, Spurs did have an awful amount of injuries last season. An 18-year-old midfielder in Archie Gray playing centre-half was really tough on him at times. There was some really poor defeats, and the squad was really stretched. Was it the style of play under Ange Postecoglou? Was it too many games? It's one of those where you wait and see. What I will say is when the season pretty much finished, when you had that back four of Porro, Romero, Van de Ven and Udogie, Spurs looked a lot tighter, and I think that tightness and at the back and that leadership from Romero was a big reason why they won Europa League, because they didn't have Bergvall, they didn't have Kulusevski, and they didn't have James Maddison. So
consistency was the key.
Yes.
OK, we will watch the Tottenham story this summer with interest. Thanks for now, Michael. Now to a former Spurs manager, and Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce have been linked with the signing of ex-Aston Villa striker Jean Duran. Speaking at the British Grand Prix earlier today, Mourinho, of course, was giving nothing away.
In Turkey every day they say that I spend my day on the phone with players, speaking with players, calling players. That's not true at all. I have my structure, the president, the technical director working on that. They know what I want, they know what I don't want. We are always in touch. But I took my month holiday to be preparing for the next, and the next is Sunday. We start Sunday.
Well, Mourinho's old club Chelsea are in action in the early hours of tomorrow morning as their Club World Cup campaign continues. It comes as they've fallen foul of UEFA financial rules. Our chief correspondent Kaveh Solokol is out in Philadelphia for us. Kaveh, what can you tell us about this UEFA story first up?
Well, I hope you're sitting comfortably. You may need a degree in accountancy to understand all this. But basically what's happened is that Chelsea have been fined €31 million by UEFA for breaking their financial rules. Now that can increase to €91 million if Chelsea miss financial targets which have been set for them by UEFA. So this €31 million fine is made up of a €20 million fine for breaking UEFA's financial monitoring rules, and that could go up by another £60 million if over the next 4 years Chelsea miss the targets which have been set by UEFA. Also, Chelsea have been fined €11 million for breaking UEFA's squad cost rules. Those rules basically say that clubs can only spend a maximum of 80% of their revenue on transfers and player wages. And UEFA say that Chelsea have broken those rules and they've gone over the permitted 80%. UEFA say Chelsea have spent between 80 and 90% of their revenue on transfers and player wages. Also, if you remember the sort of slightly strange situation where the two hotels that are at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea sold those two hotels. They were involved in a transaction which was worth £76 million. Basically what happened is that they were sold by one subsidiary of Chelsea's holding company to another subsidiary of Chelsea's holding company. That meant that Chelsea could bank an extra £76 million in revenue, which obviously helps them when they're trying to comply with financial fair play rules and PSR rules. Now that kind of transaction is allowed under Premier League rules, but it is not allowed under UEFA's rules, and that is one of the reasons why Chelsea have been hit with this fine. So that's Chelsea. Now the Aston Villa case is a bit simpler. What's happened with Aston Villa is that they've been fined €11 million for breaking UEFA's financial rules. That can rise to €26 million if Aston Villa miss financial targets set by UEFA. Now the €11 million fine is made up of €5 million for breaking UEFA's football earning rules, and also €6 million for breaking UEFA's squad cost rules. So Aston Villa have also spent more than the permitted 80% of their revenue on player wages and transfers. And that €5 million fine for breaking the football earnings rules, that can increase by €15 million to a maximum of €20 million if Aston Villa miss financial targets which have been set for them by UEFA. Very, very simple, isn't it? I mean, why can't UEFA just release a press statement saying Chelsea have been fined this much for breaking this rule, Aston Villa have been fined this much for breaking this rule? No, instead we get long, convoluted statements with addendums and attachments and findings and tables, and goes on and on and on. I'm just a football reporter doing my best to understand all this. I think I may need to take a sort of evening course in accountancy to keep up with all these financial regulations which have basically taken over football over the past couple of years.
Carve, this is why we pay you the big bucks, and I shall be on to you to help me with my tax return in a couple of months.
I wish.
Okay, let's just get to this very strange situation that Chelsea have got later on over in America. They're coming up against a man that they're about to have on their team, but he's playing in the World Cup quarter-final against them.
Before I come to that, can I just come to one other thing as well, which is even more complicated, because this is really important for Chelsea and Aston Villa supporters. Is there a possibility that they could also be under a transfer embargo from UEFA? Now, I've been trying to get my head around this, read everything that UEFA have released, and there is a possibility that Chelsea and Aston Villa will be limited from registering players for UEFA competitions going forward. Because in one of the releases from UEFA today, and I'll just read it out to you so you can get your head around it, it says that both Chelsea and Aston Villa have agreed to be subject to sporting restrictions which may mean that they won't be able to register any new players on their A list for UEFA club competitions. And I think what they go on to say is that both Chelsea and Aston Villa have to balance their books when it comes to transfers, so they need to sell players as well as buy players to comply with UEFA's regulations and to be able to register players for UEFA competitions. So I hope I answered that as well.